You're listening to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast, episode 207. Welcome to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. I'm your host, Paula Price, lawyer turned certified executive coach. This podcast was created to empower women lawyers just like you to create a life and practice you love. Join me every week for a break from the hustle so we can focus on you, what you truly want, and how you can create it. If you're over the overwhelm, done with putting out fires, and ready to redefine success on your own terms, you're in the right place. Ready for today's episode? Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome back to the podcast, and welcome to any new listeners to today's podcast episode. If you are new to me, my name is Paula Price. I am a former practicing lawyer turned coach for lawyers and the host of this podcast. If you're a returning guest, welcome back. I'm thrilled to have you. Today's episode is inspired by all of the students across Canada and the US who may be spending their very first summers at a law firm as summer students. And what I'm hoping to do today is to help you out, to offer you some ideas, to help teach you about some of the common challenges that you can expect as a law student making the transition from law school to law firm. So I'm going to set out some of those common challenges might be, and I'm also going to offer you some suggestions and resources to help you bridge the gap between law school and law firm. Now, if you are not a law student, that's okay. If you're a lawyer who's in your early years of practice, much of what we talk about today will be relevant to you. So some of it will be a review. And I'd also offer that this is a review of topics that are really pillars of your practice that are worth revisiting, and that this discussion will be a good exercise for you to assess how you're doing and where you want to develop further. Now, if you're not a student and you're not a junior lawyer, and in fact, you're a seasoned listener or a new listener, maybe you're joining from a law firm and you're in the professional development sphere, or if you are at a law school and you're advising students on their careers, welcome. I'm so thrilled to have you here because what I'm offering is a resource to help support your students. And if you have any questions about what I talk about today or how I can further support your students, please do reach out to me. I would love to hear from you. I think we are all in this together. The law schools, the law firms, the independent consultants and coaches like myself, all of us are here to help support the lawyers and the students as they grow and develop in the legal profession. And let's get together and combine our resources and do what we can to create positive change and support within the legal profession. So welcome, everybody. I'm thrilled to have you here today. A little bit about me in terms of my background. I'm a 47-year-old woman. I have practiced law for about 13 to 15 years, depending on how you count those years. I spent my first summer at a law firm way back in 2002. That means I have been in the legal profession in one shape or another since that time. So that's over 20 years. I summered at a large national law firm on Bay Street in Canada, and I have practiced as a lawyer primarily within a large national firm, most of that time based in Vancouver, Canada. That's where my family is from. That's where I live currently. And my practice was as a commercial litigator. I started out as a summer student. I went through articles at a national firm. All of that was in Toronto. I then moved back to Vancouver, where I practiced first at a smaller litigation boutique and then at a larger firm where I was doing commercial litigation. So I have been in law firms. I know what it looks like from the lawyer's perspective. I've mentored students in my capacity as a lawyer. And over the past 8 years, so since 2018, I've been working with lawyers in my capacity as a coach. So I went back to school, I got trained as a coach, and the work that I do now primarily is working with lawyers to help support them as a career coach. What does that mean? It means I help lawyers with career strategy and career transitions. So if you're going from job A to job B, if you're a law student and you're looking to get a position at a law firm, I have resources to support you in that transition, and I can support you in that transition. If you're a lawyer at a law firm, going from firm A to firm B or looking for something different, I can help you with that as well. I can also help you with all the nuts and bolts of what it means to run a practice. So things like business development, establishing a market for your work, figuring out how to practice effectively. So practice management tools like productivity, scheduling, combating procrastination, and leveraging your executive functioning skills, which can be really helpful, especially if you are a lawyer who struggles with ADHD. That's another area where I have been doing quite a bit of coaching. So that's what I do in my day-to-day. I support lawyers through individual coaching. I do group coaching, and I also offer training. One of the things I'll be talking about today is a couple of free training opportunities that I have available that I'm inviting you to. So stay tuned for a little bit more information about that. I will also be sharing some of the common challenges that I see law students face, law students and young lawyers, as they make the transition from law school to law firm. Now, the reason I'm going through the common challenges isn't so much because I'm trying to scare you and make what might already be something that you feel a little bit nervous about, something to feel scared about. What I think is really important when you're making a transition of any kind is to have a plan. That plan involves creating goals for yourself. It also involves identifying what some of the challenges are going to be so that you're not surprised, so that you can plan in advance how you're going to address those challenges, and so that you can create the support that you need in order to navigate those challenges most successfully. So I'm going to share those with you in just a few minutes, along with some of the suggestions that I have to help prepare you for your summer at a law firm. So again, stepping back, I'm dedicating this episode to all the students who are starting out at law firms this summer. This might be your very first time working in an office environment, so that can be daunting in itself. It may be your very first experience working in a law firm. If you do not come from a family of lawyers, there may be a lot of unwritten rules that you're not aware of. You might find that navigating through this ecosystem that is a law firm is particularly daunting. So I want to help you with that. If you do have a background of lawyers in your family and you already know what to expect, then you may already have a leg up in this department. And I'd encourage you to continue on and still listen to this episode, because chances are we're going to cover some areas that will be helpful for you so that you can plan ahead, so that you know what to expect, so that you can confirm that you are indeed on the right track. Now, one of the things I'll talk about, and I just mentioned it, is that I am offering free training. Now, this is a free training that is all about making the transition from law school to law firm. I'm going to offer the training over 2 individual webinars, part 1 and part 2. Part 1 of the webinar is going to be on Friday, May 16th at noon Pacific time. The second webinar is going to be on Friday, May 23rd at 11 a.m. Pacific time. So those are 2 webinars. I will put links to register for those webinars with the show notes that accompany this episode. Now, what we're going to do during those webinars is I'm going to cover 6 different strategies that will help you make the transition from law school to law firm, from where you are now to where you want to be. Now, you are all invited. If you're a student and you are in your first weeks at your summer at your law firm, perfect. Sign up. I hope you can join live. If you can't join live, no problem. You can miss the actual webinar itself, and I will send you a link with a recording of the episode. So if you can't attend live, something comes up at work, that's absolutely fine. Now, if you're a student in law school and you are a year or 2 away from a summer position, no problem. Feel free to join. I'd love to have you there, and you can have a sneak peek into what's coming up for you over the next few years. If you're a lawyer or an articling student and you're already practicing at a firm and what you want is a refresh, or simply to note that you are on track, or to see how I would frame this discussion, how I would tackle this transition, then by all means, join the webinar. We would love to have you there. I think it can be particularly helpful, especially if you're minded to share in the webinar by participating in the Q&A or by participating in the chat, sharing comments as we go through. Not saying that you have to do that, but it can really enrich the discussion. Now, if you're a more senior lawyer, this set of webinars might be helpful for you in terms of learning about how you might support your students. Not that you don't have strategies already, but there may be some topics that I cover or a way in which I cover it that you might add to your toolkit, Or you might decide that you want my help to help with your students and lawyers through professional development, training, coaching, whatever would be suitable for your firm. And then finally, if you are in talent management at a law firm and you would like additional support, I can help you and your lawyers. If you're at a law school and you're advising students on their careers, this might also be an event that you attend, and you might think about how I could help you as an additional resource in preparing your students for interviews at law firms and also transitioning from law school to law firm. So really, this set of webinars is designed to help summer students, and I want it to be inclusive. I want everybody to feel welcome. There's no limit to the number of people who can enroll unless we hit something like, 500 people, in which case maybe I have to think about whether to increase the cap on my Zoom room, but I'm pretty sure we will all fit comfortably in the Zoom room. I will also mention that I'm going to host these webinars in a webinar format. And what that means for you as an attendee is that your attendance is confidential. The only person who will know that you're there is me, and that is because you will have signed up for it. So I'll have your email address, but you are more than welcome to be a lurker. Just watch the webinar, not engage, not participate. Nobody will see you on the screen. You are also welcome to participate and show your name. I'm guessing at this point you've been on a few Zoom webinars before, but if not, you do have that option of participating anonymously or using your name. So that's what's coming up. May 16, May 23rd, both Fridays. The first webinar is at noon Pacific time. The second webinar is at 11 Pacific time. I'm aiming for 60 minutes each, but I will have flexibility to go longer if that makes sense in the moment. And I'm really here to serve you, to meet you, to support you, and answer any questions that you have. And you can submit questions during the webinar, and you're also welcome to submit your questions before the webinar. So with that, we're going to dive into the meat of today's podcast episode, which is my message to incoming students who are starting at law firms, what I think is helpful for you to know. Now, if we step back and look at this transition from a very high level, there are a few key things that are happening as you move from law school, from being a law student to law firm, where you are now maybe a summer student, an articling student, or a very junior lawyer who is learning the ropes of what it means to be at a law firm. Now, the first comment I have is to note that the skills that got you here won't get you there. I love that expression, and I see it repeat itself in career growth and transition at all levels. So it's true when you go from student to lawyer, and it's true as you move through the ranks as a practicing lawyer. So what does that mean? If you think about the skills that make you a really successful student in a law school environment, not all of those schools will translate into success as a practitioner within a law firm environment. And I'm going to get into what some of those skills are, but that is the first message that I would love to broadcast, because it can be a little bit daunting if you find that you are a very successful student, you are used to getting really good grades, you're used to receiving a lot of validation for the work that you do as a student, and you're used to feeling confident. And what can happen is you step into this new environment, the rules all of a sudden change, sometimes quite dramatically. And instead of feeling like you are this really capable and confident and able student, you feel like a fish out of water. So if this is something that you're experiencing, I want to let you know you are 100% not alone. This is a very common experience, and it's entirely solvable. What we need to do here is to identify what some of the skill sets are, the ones that got you to where you are now. We want to look at some of the skills that will get you to that next level, and then we want to figure out strategies to help you develop that new set of skills. So it's entirely solvable, but it's something for which I wanted to give you the heads up. And one of the beautiful things about learning how to adapt your skills, how to identify what has worked in the past that will no longer work, and how to transition going forward, is that is a skill that you will continue to exercise over the course of your career. Now, the second thing I want to highlight is that there is no clear set of rules. So when you are in law school, there is a lot of structure that is already in place. You have courses that you need to take. You have a schedule that is set by the school. There are certain grade requirements that are required in order to pass from one year to the next. And there are exams that everybody writes. There's an answer key that has the correct answers. If you're writing a paper, there are very clear criteria in terms of what you need to meet. And there are deadlines. There is a cadence to the academic year that is predictable. So you go from this environment where there's a lot of structure in place to a law firm environment where there probably is not the same level of structure. Now, I say probably because some firms will have a lot of machinery in place to create a structure around your experience as a student and then as a lawyer. So some firms will have a lot of structure, relatively speaking. Others will be much more fluid. And I find that there's often a correlation between the size of the firm and the degree of structure. So often the larger the firm, the more structures are in place. But that is not always the case. It's not a hard and fast rule. But you might expect if you are a student working at a firm where there are 5 lawyers, there will be fewer rules and frameworks than if you were to join a firm where there are offices across the world, hundreds of lawyers, and a number of different structures that have been implemented. So that is kind of at a high level something to keep in mind, that the structures that you may have been used to having in law school may not be there in the law firm environment, and that can make it more challenging to know what to do next, whether or not you are succeeding, how to succeed, etc. Now, the third thing that I wanted to highlight here is that you may not know where to go for help. When you go from law school to law firm, you might find yourself in an environment where you don't know that many people. You might have chosen a firm that is in a brand new city where you don't know anybody, you don't have a lot of support. You go to work, you have the lawyers that you work for, you have your colleagues and other students, and maybe it takes you time to warm up to them, to know who you can trust. And maybe you have questions, but you don't want to ask those questions because you don't want to feel like maybe they're not the smartest questions. Maybe you don't know if you should confide in a colleague because maybe you don't know if you can trust that they are going to keep what you are asking them between you and them. You might not know who's who in the zoo, who is a good person to talk to. And so what that can do is have you keep to yourself and not ask some of the questions that you want answers to. So what I'm offering to you through today's podcast episode, in the upcoming webinars that I'm offering, and frankly, any discussion that you would like to have with me, is a confidential and safe space for you to ask your questions. You might not feel comfortable asking your questions at your firm. You may not feel comfortable asking at your law school. I want you to have somewhere where you can go, whether it's me or another coach or somebody, a mentor, where you can get the answers that you need. So again, stepping back at the high level, we're thinking about that move from law school to law firm. The skills that got you here may not get you there. There is no clear set of rules like there was in law school, and you may have trouble finding the appropriate people to ask for help. Now, the next thing I would like to highlight is that you have a transition to make. And the way you might think about this is that you are crossing a bridge. Now, I'm going to make this sound a lot scarier than it needs to be. And again, this isn't to put you off or to increase your fear or anxiety if that's something that you're already feeling. I'm just using this as a way to explain what you might be feeling and then to contextualize it, to break it down, to make it more simple, to identify the components of what you're going to be learning and developing and applying yourself to as you transition from point A to point B. So I want you to think of the bridge. And I live in Vancouver. I live very close to something called the Capilano Suspension Bridge, which is this long bridge that is suspended between basically 2 mountains, and it goes over a river. So you can imagine a big long bridge. There are trees on one side of the bridge. There are trees on the other side of the bridge, and the bridge crosses a river, and the river flows. It's a little bit noisy sometimes, and the bridge is really high up off the ground. So if you can imagine standing on one edge of the bridge, you take a few steps down, and what you find is that the bridge itself is a little bit wobbly. It's made up of these wooden slates that are all lined up next to each other. And some people like to get onto the bridge and jump up and down next to you. So you're kind of trying to make your way across the bridge, but then the bridge starts to bob up and down, and sometimes it wiggles from side to side. And so as you traverse the bridge, sometimes it can feel a little bit unsteady. If you have a fear of heights, it's an uncomfortable place to be, especially as you get closer to the middle of the bridge and you're looking down at the rushing water, and maybe it's windy and maybe it's raining. And I mean, who knows what's happening on that bridge? But ultimately, that bridge can feel a little bit daunting because you are going from one side of the bridge to the other side of the bridge. And when you are in the course of crossing over that bridge, you may feel at times like you don't want to cross the bridge. You want to go back to where you started from. You can feel fear. You can feel a lack of confidence. You can feel a sense of doubt. Is this bridge even strong enough to carry the weight that you have and all these other people who are crossing the bridge? And what if you get to the other side of the bridge and then what if the bridge falls apart, etc.? This experience can be really daunting. And I say that not to scare you, but to let you know that if you feel nervous about making the transition from A to B, you are 100% normal. You're not alone. So many people in your position have that very same fear. And to be blunt, I don't know very many people who do not face some sort of fear when it comes to a transition, especially something like leaving law school and starting at a law firm where there are a bunch of unknowns and a bunch of new variables. And for those of you who experienced the pandemic, which I'm assuming is everybody, that is one of those places and times where we all collectively as a planet experienced a state of uncertainty and transition. And you saw the effect that had on the world. We were all kind of wondering what comes next. Now, by comparison, going from law school to law firm is a relatively minor transition. This is not a crisis. This is not a pandemic situation, but there is an element of uncertainty involved. And so that uncertainty can be anxiety inducing, especially if you haven't prepared for it, or you don't know what to expect, or you don't feel like you have the resources that you need to make that transition. And so again, I say this not to scare you, but to tell you that there are things that you can do to make that transition more seamless. And if you feel nervous, you are not alone. It's completely normal. And there are a number of tools at your disposal to help you go from point A to point B. So the third thing that I want to talk about here are the skills that you're going to develop as you make the transition from law student to lawyer. And I'm going to go through the list. As I go through that list, the theme here is that lawyer success often is attached to a number of characteristics. And so I'm going to highlight what those characteristics are and the growth curve that you'll likely experience going from where you are as a student to where you are as a lawyer. So the first on this list is going from a rule follower to taking ownership of your practice. Now, this idea of taking ownership of your practice is something you're very likely going to hear about from your very early days in a law firm. And what that means is that you are going to take responsibility. You're going to take on an owner's mindset versus an employee mindset. And this can be a fairly big shift if you're used to being a rule follower, right? If you're used to being in a law school environment where, as we discussed earlier, the infrastructure is in place for you. So it's not a transition that typically happens overnight, and that is perfectly okay. The goal here is to establish step by step, day by day, practices and habits where you increasingly take ownership over your practice. And if you choose to come to the webinars that I'm offering, I will be talking about some ways to develop strategies to be really intentional about the way that you approach your summer, the way that you approach your practice, so that you've got the skills you need, some tools to develop that owner mindset. Now, another shift that you'll need to get used to is this idea of having a clearly defined pathway to practicing in a shifting landscape. So again, if you take law school, there's a cadence to the year. There are exams. You'll have advance notice of deadlines. And there's a certain predictability in routine. You have a certain professor. You'll be in a class with certain people. You'll all write the same exams, etc. To practice where there's this shifting landscape. So shifting landscape in the sense that you don't know who you might be working with in any given day. The files that you get assigned to are based on which files come through the door and when, and who has capacity and when they have capacity. It might be the location of your office. Who are you sitting close to? It might be the group that you're assigned to over a particular period of time. What you might find is that you get involved on a big file. Maybe it's a trial, and then all of a sudden, you're working hard toward a certain date, and then something gets adjourned. You no longer need to work on that. Or maybe you're on a big transaction and the deal is flowing and the paperwork is going smoothly. You're running all the due diligence and all of a sudden there's a big bomb that explodes and it's all hands on deck. Or maybe it's that every day there's a different file that comes in. You don't have one continuous thing that you're working on. Maybe the deadlines shift, they get moved up, they get pushed back. So instead of being in this environment that's relatively controlled, you're now in this real world environment. Not that there's nothing unreal or that it's unreal if you're in school, it's still the real world, but you're now interfacing with clients in the real world and their real problems, as opposed to some of the more hypothetical situations that you might be dealing with in law school. And so you're needing to get used to this idea of shifting assignments, shifting people, shifting deadlines. So you'll need to learn how to navigate that more nimbly. And again, if you join me for the webinar, we will be talking about how to create your own pathway so that you're less dependent on a pathway that's been laid out for you. Another shift that you might notice is a shift from individual performance to performance within the context of a team. So in law school, for example, you might be looking at your grades, at your performance as an individual, whereas in a law firm environment, there might be much more of an emphasis on working within a team, leading within a team, how your piece of the project fits in with other pieces of the project. So you want to learn how to be really effective when it comes to leading, communicating, being part of a team. Again, this is something that we'll talk about more in the webinar series. You are ultimately going to want to become a trusted advisor as a lawyer. This is kind of the pinnacle of success as a lawyer, is where you are a trusted advisor and the clients come to you because they want your help. What this looks like as a more junior lawyer or as a student is becoming that go-to, that indispensable person that everybody knows they can rely on and they want on their team. So how do you go from being someone who's doing everything for the first time? And when you start out at a law firm, you are literally doing everything for the first time, whether it's sending an email, making a photocopy, writing a brief, writing an email. It's all for the first time. And that can be quite overwhelming, especially if you're putting a lot of pressure on yourself to do everything perfectly the first time. So I can help you with that, making the transition from feeling like you're doing everything from the first time and having almost like Bambi legs in your professional work to reaching that space where you feel more confident. You feel like that trusted advisor, that go-to. Another challenge that you might face is where you have this upbringing, this nature where you've been conditioned and socially conditioned to feel like being humble is a really positive attribute, and yet you're being asked to instill confidence in others and to speak confidently about things you may not know a lot about. Now, this is something that I have struggled with personally, especially when I was starting out as a lawyer. I was conditioned at a very young age to think that humility was the best thing ever, and I probably took that too far. And so you will need to learn how to balance this idea of being humble enough and yet also instilling confidence in others. And so the way that you communicate, the way that you approach problems, the type of relationships you build with others, but achieving a balance where you are exuding confidence without coming across as arrogant. These are some of the things that you will want to master. It's a skill that you'll want to master as you transition from law student to lawyer. You might also want to think about the transition that you're making. And we alluded earlier to this idea of the clearly defined pathway to this shifting landscape. And part of that means that you're going to be going from this idea of being in an environment where your grades are really the biggest thing that are on the line, right? As a student, you're evaluated largely by the grades that you receive on your exams and in your courses. And in a law firm environment, the measure is no longer the grades. The measure is actually what is the practical implication of what it is that you're doing. And that can be quite a big transition when what's at stake is your client's civil liberties. So you might think about a situation, if you're in criminal law, for example, where your client might be behind bars. If the outcome is not in their favor, you might think of their resources. So they might have a lot of money at stake. They might have business opportunities at stake. And you're responsible for helping them achieve their goals. There might be real consequences in terms of relationships. So you might think of lawyers who work as family lawyers, and you might be the person who's representing somebody in a custody dispute, and it might have significant implications on their access to their children. So adjusting to what it's like to go from somebody who is really acting in your own best interest. As a student, you're looking at your own professional, academic achievements, and now you're moving beyond simply your own professional achievements to the impact that you're having on others as well. Another transition you might be thinking about is this idea of the A+ perfectionist mentality to more pragmatic and out-of-the-box solutions to problems. So in law school, there might be an answer key. There might be a correct answer. And in an environment where there's no answer key, where you're testing novel areas of law, where there is no clear answer, that is a different skill set that is required in order to succeed in that environment. Other shifts that you might notice is this idea of shifting priorities. I mentioned before that grades might be really important for a law student to be deemed successful, right? It's a subjective measure. It's not the only measure, but it's one that people can rely on because it's relatively standardized. So that might have been your priority. Whereas in a law firm environment, relationships might be a bigger priority. The relationships that are internal to your firm, to establish relationships with lawyers and others who are going to give you work, and work is the lifeblood of your practice, especially as a student and junior lawyer in a law firm. Other things that you might need to consider is the time that is required or that is invested on the work that you do. So as a student, you have unlimited time, really, to write your papers and study for exams and prepare yourself. Whereas in a law firm environment, you are very likely going to be billing by the hour. And so there's money attached to your time, money that the client is spending. So the time that you spend working on a project may be limited by the resources that your client has to invest. It may also be the timelines. You might be working on timelines that are just very short. Something comes in last minute, or there's an emergency on a file, and you simply don't have the luxury of time to do a perfect job. You have to do a pragmatic, practical, what is best in the time you have type of job. So that's another adjustment you might need to make. And then finally, I've alluded to this already, but managing your time. This idea of managing your time, first of all, where you take the structures out. If you think about a law firm environment where you've got multiple different clients, you've got multiple deadlines, and there's nobody who's really looking over your shoulder, making sure that you're doing all of this work, you have a lot of independence. So learning how to structure your days, structure your time so that you're meeting and achieving your deadlines, and also how you're adapting to real-time demands on your time. So for example, if things shift, if you're already engaged and then an urgent matter comes in, how do you shuffle around your existing timelines so that you can get work done on a priority basis and make sure that your clients, who typically at the very beginning are other lawyers, making sure that they're all happy. So that's a bit of a laundry list. I'll just recap that really quickly for you. Some of the shifts that you're going to be making: rule follower to the leader, the owner of your practice, taking ownership of your practice. This idea of having the clearly defined pathways in a law school environment to moving into the shifting landscapes that you can expect in a law firm. Moving from individual performance to the performance that you have as a leader within a team and as a player on a bigger team, communication, playing your role within that team. Moving from being the person who's doing everything for the first time to becoming that trusted advisor, that go-to for the lawyers at your firm. The idea of navigating the balance between humility and confidence without coming across as arrogant. That is a real challenge for a lot of lawyers. The idea of moving from a perfectionistic A+ mentality to being more pragmatic, thinking about creative and out-of-the-box solutions to real-world problems. Your grades being the main thing on the line to greater consequences that impact more than you. So your clients' civil liberties, their resources, so their money, for example, business opportunities, and their relationships, which could be with family members. We talked about shifting priorities. So the priorities that you had as a student may shift as a lawyer, and you may be less rewarded for the sort of academic prettiness of what you're putting together. This idea of doing the perfect brief, the perfect memo, the perfect document relative to how are your relationships? Are you able to communicate effectively? Are you able to develop a consistent market for your work? Are you able to navigate difficult conversations with clients? Are you able to make clients happy? So there's a shift there in terms of the skills that you might need. We also talked about that idea of academic smarts, like writing that perfect paper versus coming up with practical solutions that are focused on results and deal with real consequences. I didn't go into it in so much detail, but the idea of legal writing really comes into play here. If you think about how you would write academically versus how you'd write in a professional context, sometimes there's a real difference in the style. We talked about taking the time you need versus taking the time that is commercially viable or available to you. We talked about deadlines, this idea that you may need to shift from deadlines that you know about well in advance to deadlines that are sprung on you at the last minute. And then finally, managing your time and practice when you are juggling all these new things. You've got that shifting landscape, you've got a number of different clients, you've got different projects, things are moving all the time. So how do you manage yourself in that environment? So these are all areas where I help lawyers. These are all areas that we are going to cover in the upcoming webinars. And so if you'd like some ideas on how to navigate some of these challenges, then please do join me. I'll be telling you in a minute or two what the topics are that we'll cover more specifically. But the idea there is to help you arm yourself in advance with some strategies and tools to navigate this new environment that you'll be working in. Coming back to big picture, as a lawyer, you get to do some really amazing work. You get to have a huge impact on the lives of others. You occupy a very important role in society, especially when it comes to the development of the law, the application of the law, how law is used as a tool for your clients, how your clients engage with it, how you facilitate that engagement. So you have a real responsibility there. There's a special role that you play within society. So there's so much there. And if you have made it this far, you've applied to law school, you're making your way through law school, you've applied to a firm, you're about to start working in a firm. Maybe again, you might be beyond your summer and you're already at a firm and you're doing this work. It has called to you, and you are now being called to put the pedal to the metal, as it were. You are there to serve, and it's an exciting time for you. And it's also a time of great learning and growth. So I'm really excited for you. And I hope that these shifts that I'm identifying for you are helping you to see where the opportunities are for you, as well as some of the challenges. So as I went through that list, there might be some that stand out to you more than others. Note those down. Whether you note them down in writing, you can come back to this episode, listen to it again, note what some of the challenges are. The more you're able to think about them in advance and plan for them, the less of an obstacle they're going to be. So crossing this bridge, as daunting as it may be, especially if we've imagined it to be this suspension bridge and it's raining and there's a bunch of tourists jumping up and down on the bridge and it's swinging from side to side. Crossing that bridge is part of the transition. You do not want to skip that step. Learning the skills that you'll learn as you move your way across the bridge, as you go from point A to point B, the strength that you build, the self-awareness that you develop, all of that is preparing you to become the person and ultimately the lawyer that you need to be on the other side of it. And I can't emphasize enough how you need to be the one to do the work. And a very simple analogy is to think about weightlifting. And if you were to go to the gym and watch somebody else lift a barbell, they would probably build muscle. Watching it doesn't build the muscle. You need to be the one who lifts the weight. You need to be the one who crosses the bridge. And so for every effort that you put in, there is a reward, and that is your increased skill, your increased confidence, your increased resilience. I promise you that. And while it is you who needs to develop these skills, you do not need to do it alone. So you are encouraged. I encourage you to seek out mentors, whether the mentors are lawyers at your firm, students that you trust in maybe senior years. Maybe your mentors are your law professors. Maybe it's your career services advisor. Maybe your mentors are people that you've met in the legal profession. Maybe they're family friends. Maybe your mentors are family members. Maybe they're lawyers at your firm. I encourage you to seek out all the mentors you possibly can. Once you set foot in the profession, look for mentorship programs and opportunities. You want to find people who are ahead of you, who are going to look out for you. As you progress in your firm, you'll also want to think about sponsors. They play a different role from mentors. Mentors can really be anywhere, and their job is to nurture you and think about opportunities for you and encourage you. Sponsors go that extra mile. Sponsors are basically like mentors who also sponsor you and put you forward for opportunities. And typically sponsors are within your organization. They could also, I think, be outside of your organization, but they're going that step further. They're actively helping you move forward in your career. So you want to get out there and find yourself mentors and sponsors. Your firm might assign them to you. Don't limit yourself to whoever it is that gets assigned to you. Do your own searching for mentors, coaches. So I'm a coach. My job as a coach is to provide support to you that is anonymous. So our relationship, if we work together, is confidential. It would be true of any coach that you work with. I like to produce the podcast that I produce because it provides anonymous support. Anybody can listen to my podcast and learn about what I share there. Such a podcast didn't exist when I was going through my early years of practice. That's something I wish that I had. That's one of the reasons why I produced that podcast. So listen to the podcast if it's helpful. I'll share a little bit more about what you might find on the podcast. Other lawyers can be people who support you, your colleagues. Counselors can be a great support. So if you find that you struggle with anxiety or setting boundaries or fear or depression or anything of that nature, then find a really good counselor. There are some excellent counselors out there. I've had a number of them on my podcast, and there are counselors who are specific for lawyers. Often they were lawyers themselves, and now they are counselors for lawyers. So build that team for yourself. Build support for yourself. You do not need to do this alone, and assemble a team that will support you. Believe me, the people around you want to help you and see you succeed, including me. That brings us to the next step here in this episode, which is my invitation to you. And I'm going to offer 3 suggestions or invitations to help you. You, of course, are welcome to come to the upcoming webinars. So, as I mentioned at the very beginning of this podcast, there will be 2 of them. And the first webinar will be on May 16th, Friday, May 16th at noon Pacific time. And the second is going to be on May 23rd at 11 a.m. Pacific time. Again, it will be webinar format, so nobody will see you on the Zoom screen. It's not a meeting format where everybody's name appears, even if their image doesn't appear. You will be completely anonymous if that's what you want. If you cannot attend live, sign up anyways, and I will send you a link with the recording of the episode. If you have questions, you can ask questions before or during the webinars themselves. You can send me questions in advance. I'm really easy to find. You can send me an email. You can submit a question on my intake form, on my website, all of that. And really we'll be covering 3 themes in each. Years ago, I developed a program for lawyers making the transition from law school to law firm. And it was a 6-week program where we covered a theme every week. The themes are as follows. The first theme is understanding the law firm and setting goals for your law firm experience. So law firms, in my view, are a unique ecosystem. So I talk a little bit about what that ecosystem is all about and how you can strategically set goals for yourself over the course of the summer. So if you're a summer student, great. You can set your goals over the summer. If you're an articling student, you can set your goals for your articling period. And if you're beyond that, if you're an associate, then you might think of a time frame and set goals up for yourself that you can focus on over the next period of time. The second topic is networking and developing a market for your work. One of the challenges I see among new lawyers and law students who transition from law school to law firm is that they aren't accustomed to this idea of marketing yourself for work. I know I struggled with this when I was a junior lawyer because jobs that I'd had up until that point weren't based on me going out and soliciting work, the work was given to me. And as a lawyer, you are a mini entrepreneur. And so you need to develop a market for your work. You need to develop relationships with the lawyers within a department who will then hire you. It's really important to understand that and to focus on learning the skills to develop a market for your work. So that's what we focus on as the second tool. The third is time management. So I've talked about that already, how time management in a law firm is different from time management at school. So I'll offer some tips there. So the first webinar, the one that's happening on May 16th, will cover those 3 topics. So understanding a law firm and setting goals. We will talk about networking and developing a network for your work. And of course, time management. Now, the second webinar is going to cover the second 3 topics that I've typically covered in the summer course. Those 3 topics are communication, number 1, which is speaking and nonverbal communication in a law firm environment. Now, speaking is one of those things where our minds typically jump to really formal speaking. So public speaking for a large audience, speaking in a moot environment, speaking in front of a judge. But what I'd offer to you is that speaking in a law firm is so much more than that. Speaking in a law firm is speaking to the senior lawyer to give them an update on the file that you're working on. Speaking is instructing your assistant in a way that is respectful and gets the job done. Speaking is raising your hand and volunteering an idea when you're sitting in a boardroom full of lawyers and clients and people where maybe you feel a bit intimidated. So I want to help you with some basic skills when it comes to communicating so that you feel more confident speaking up in the law firm setting. There's also communication, the sequel, which is about writing. And this follows up on some of the skills that help you speak publicly or that speak effectively in a law firm environment. And so some strategies to write effectively, because the difference between writing in a law school setting and a law firm setting, there's a number of differences there. So I want to highlight what some of those might be so that you've got that heads up. And then finally, the final topic is feedback. And as a law student in a law firm, chances are you're going to be getting some feedback, whether it's a formal performance review or a markup where there's red ink spilled all over the memo that you just wrote. And so you want to learn how to maximize feedback. You might also need to learn how to solicit feedback, because lawyers, God bless them, aren't always very good at giving feedback because they're busy and they maybe don't know how to give feedback. And maybe they're really happy with your work and they don't say anything at all, or they're very disappointed and they don't say anything at all. And how are you to know? So we spend some time on feedback. So on May 23rd, if you join me for that webinar, we will talk about communication. We'll talk about feedback. So those are the different topics that you can expect to hear from me on. And I'm really excited to dive into those topics. I think you will find that the discussion that we have helps to identify for you some tips, some tricks, some practical strategies to feel more confident and have a more successful experience making the transition from law school to law firm. So that's the first invitation. The second invitation is something that you can do on your own when you wrap up listening to today's podcast episode, and that's self-reflection. Now, as a coach, I have really embraced a practice of self-reflection. I journal, I ask myself questions, I get coaching. So I'm big on this whole self-reflection concept. It's not something I was very aware of as a law student or as a lawyer. And I can tell you it makes a world of difference when you take the time to self-reflect. You can learn so much without even having a conversation with another human being. So when today's podcast episode wraps up, I'd invite you to reflect on what you want for your summer experience or one of these other experiences if you're an articling student or a junior lawyer. So think about what it is that you want. That means identifying your goals, why they matter to you, what's important. I encourage you to think about the challenges that you'll encounter. So I've listed out a number of challenges that are common for students and young lawyers. You might think of other challenges that you would potentially face. The idea here is to get them all out, write them on a piece of paper so you can look at them and start to problem solve in terms of how you're going to deal with these problems. I encourage you to think about who is going to support you. So we talked about that a few minutes ago. Mentors, coaches, other lawyers, counselors. Who in your network do you want to have on your team to help you as you navigate some of the challenges that you very likely will face as you move from law student to lawyer? We're going to think about how you're going to get there. So this is the strategy. What strategies will you have to get from point A to point B? If you're crossing over that bridge, it means putting one foot in front of the other. What does that look like in a law firm setting for you? What are you going to do to solicit work? What kind of work do you want to solicit from lawyers? How are you going to do that work? How are you going to manage your time? How are you going to structure your summer? What's important to you about the summer? So this is the how-to section of your plan. And then finally, mindset. What type of mindset are you going to adopt as you venture out as a brand new lawyer? So first as a student, then as a lawyer. If you haven't already explored the work of Carol Dweck, she is an American psychologist who coined the term growth mindset, then I encourage you to start there. She's got a TED Talk. I think it's, 10, 15 minutes long. She talks about growth mindset, what it is. Listen to that. We'll link to it in the show notes. That's a really great place to start when it comes to thinking about how you're thinking about your growth and development as a lawyer. So I told you I had 3 things, 3 suggestions, 3 invitations. So that first one is join me for my webinars. Again, I will post the links with the show notes to this episode. You'll find the show notes at the website, thejoyfulpractice.com/podcast. If you can't find it, don't worry, send me an email. I'll send you the links. I'll also be posting them on LinkedIn for anybody who is looking for them there. So that was the first invitation. The second invitation is that self-reflection. So answering the questions that I just went through to help you get familiar with yourself, what your goals are, how you're going to approach them, what your obstacles are, how you're going to overcome them. And then third is to dive into this podcast series as a resource. So there are 206 episodes before this one, and all of them are related to legal practice. Yes, it is called the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers. I think most of what I talk about is applicable to all lawyers. So you'll find podcast episodes about time and practice management, career transitions, getting stuck at work. And there are a number of episodes that are specific to law firms. So how to maximize your performance review at a law firm. So I encourage you to check that one out. Transitioning as a lateral hire. I think there will be some parallels between being a lateral and being a student. So you might want to check that one out. I have a recent podcast series on the different steps of navigating a job transition. So that might also be helpful for you in terms of orienting yourself in what you want from your legal career. So dive into that series of podcast episodes, see what jumps out at you. And if you have any questions about anything in the podcast episodes, by all means, feel free to reach out to me. Now, also in the future, I have some guests lined up who will be incredible, who will be talking about legal writing, who will be talking about communication, presentations. So these are all topics that are highly relevant and relevant to all lawyers. And in particular, if you're a junior lawyer, you might think about how these topics, how the things that we are talking about apply to you and how you can leverage what you learn to succeed at your law firm. To do that, you just need to listen to the podcast. You can sign up for my email newsletter and you'll get news right away about this podcast. You can share it with your friends. I would really love that if you spread the good word. This includes any other law students that you might work with. If you're at a law firm, share it with other lawyers, share it with other professional development professionals who are involved in talent management. I would love for this to be a resource that everybody who wants to can have access to and to use to thrive in their practice. If you would like to leave a rating and review, please do. I really love hearing from you. It helps me to reach other listeners just like you. So you can go onto iTunes or whatever it is that you listen to your podcast episodes and give me ideally a 5-star rating. Comment if you're minded to do that. I will read your comment. I read every comment, and that would mean a ton to me. You're also welcome to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I've got my profile there. You can friend me. I'd love to know who you are. I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn. So these are all things that we can do to build a relationship with each other. So that, my dear friend, my dear listener, is what I have to share with you today. So hopefully this episode has given you something to think about for your transition from law student to law firm, wherever it is that you find yourself on that journey. Again, I am here to support you in whatever capacity I can do that. And I'm with you 100%. I want to see you succeed, whatever success looks like for you. If you are into your years of practice, or you are in a position where you're supporting other lawyers and you think I can help you with that, please do reach out. As I mentioned, I coach lawyers one-to-one. I do group coaching, which is really a cool thing to do. It puts lawyers, students in a room together where they learn from each other and see that they are not the only ones who may struggle with certain challenges, and It's a wonderful place to share, to build confidence, to brainstorm about solutions. And I also do speaking and presentations, and I love talking about all topics related to career transitions, to time and practice management, to confidence building, resilience, stress management, and succeeding and thriving as a lawyer. So if any of that resonates with you and you'd like to learn more, you're welcome to reach out to me. I'd absolutely love to hear from you. So with that, we're going to wrap up. I hope to see you on May 16th and May 23rd. Again, you're all invited. If you have any doubts about it, register anyways and attend live if you can. If you can't attend live, that's fine. I'll send you a link to the recording, no problem. And share this with your friends. I'd love to have, the more the merrier. And it really has been a wonderful opportunity to connect with you. So thank you again. I look forward to reconnecting with you soon, whether at the webinar or at next week's podcast. So take care. Talk to you soon. Bye for now. And if this is the only time we ever do connect, I wish you every success. I wish you every success. You've got everything that you need to be successful, to be an effective advocate, and to thrive in your legal career. Thank you, and talk to you soon. If you enjoyed today's show and don't want to miss an episode, subscribe and follow the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you haven't already, please leave a rating and review. Your feedback will help me create a podcast that's tailored to your needs and goes straight to the heart of what matters to you. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. If you want more information, visit www.thejoyfulpractice.com. See you next week.